we are recording this call today, and we'll be sharing slides as well as recording with everyone who registered after the call. So don't feel like you need to take pictures of all the slides. You will get a PDF of the slides after this event later next week. So again, welcome. This is the webinar Outdoor Learning in the Time of COVID. My name is Phoebe Byerly, and I'm joined today by my colleague Anissa Hemming from the Center for Green Schools. As we get started today, we wanted to open the call with a poll. So Anissa, if you can open that poll. In order to see the poll, it'll be on the right-hand side, and if you click the three dots at the bottom of the screen, you should be able to see the poll if you don't see that already. And the question is, we want to start out and ask what best describes what learning looks like for your school or district. So while I'm introducing this event, you can answer that question and we'll get a sense and move forward. So the Center for Green Schools, we've hosted a series of webinars this fall about COVID response and school sustainability, and I know some of you have been on some of those calls. Thank you. Gita, actually, who's a presenter today, presented with us a couple weeks ago on one of those calls. And on those webinars, we shared many examples of where sustainable, healthy school practices are go-to strategies for responding to the risk of COVID in schools. For example, green cleaning practices or improved air quality and ventilation. But possibly more than any of the others, taking learning outside is one of the strategies that really makes the most sense. Not only is it practical for keeping people healthy from COVID, we know that being outside and learning outside has many other benefits too, from improved focus, reduced stress, improved behavior, and some of the educators and folks on the phone today who are presenting will share additional benefits that they've seen and are seeing right now. For those who've been advocating for outdoor learning and outdoor play, this is really our time to shine and bring this to light. And we're thrilled to be partnering with the Green Schoolyards America, who's been leading on this at the national level to put outdoor learning in the spotlight right now. So thank you, Sharon, and your team, and a lot of other folks who've been working with you. And Sharon will share more about that national effort in a minute when we get started. All right, so I think, Anissa, we're going to close this poll so we can move forward. If you're just joining, there's a poll question open. Oh, poll question closed, I think. If you're just joining, please feel free to use the chat and share who you are and where you're calling in from. See a lot of folks from around the country, which is awesome. Okay, Anissa, do you have a sense of what the response rate is for the poll? Do we have like a general consensus?
Yeah, there were only 10 people out of the 50 or so on the line that didn't answer, so kind of a pretty good number. Okay, so the majority are in hybrid mode, it looks like, and a large percentage also are in fully remote. Looks like there's 8 folks who are mostly remote, only select groups, and just 3 folks who have schools in full session. So that's generally what we've been seeing across the country. So that's good. Okay, so today's webinar, as I mentioned, is focused on addressing the real and perceived barriers for schools to adopt outdoor learning as a reopening strategy. And I'm really excited for our diverse panel of speakers today who represent various perspectives. We have Sharon Danks, who will talk about her nonprofit and the work they're doing at the national level. We have folks from the district level, educators, and school leaders. And today, these folks will share accessible tools. We have a number of resources, and hopefully we will not overwhelm you today with resources, as well as specific equipment recommendations and suggestions, safety and outdoor access protocols, and more. And we really hope that these resources will help you take this work to the next level, wherever you're starting from. So let's see, first, not in order of
the photos you're seeing here. But first we'll hear from Sharon Danks, who's the CEO of Green Schoolyard America, about their findings from the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative that has been working since June to build a movement at the national level and document an array of best practice guidance to share with schools. So we're super excited to be able to bring you that research and that content today. Then we'll transition to hear from Justin Derry in Falmouth, Maine, Falmouth Public Schools, about how they've invested some of their CARES funding to build outdoor infrastructure and get systems in place to allow teachers to really seamlessly use the outdoors for teaching. And then we'll close with stories from on the ground with Gita Carroll and Lucas Ketzer in Boulder Valley School District. Gita's been at the helm of leading the planning effort at the district scale, and Lucas has been leading his school in implementing at the school scale. So we've got a lot to learn from these folks today and a lot to share. So hopefully you can stick with us until 5:15 Eastern time. Let's see, before we transition to hear from Sharon, we have another poll that we're going to open, which is asking about what best describes your outdoor classroom. So what does outdoor classrooms or outdoor learning look like at your school or school district right now? And some of you may say, like, we haven't thought about this at all because we're completely remote. But if that's the case, then option A would be your answer. So answer to your best ability. And we'll close that in just a minute. And just a reminder, if you have questions for the panelists throughout the call, please feel free to make a note in the chat. We can all see that. There's also a Q&A panel we'll be watching throughout the event. And we will have time at the end for questions and answers from our entire panel. But if there are questions that are a little more specific to an individual presentation, we should have time after each presenter to take a couple questions. All right, let's see. Lisa, it looks like we've probably got quite a few folks who on the line who've completed the answer. So I'll give you 3 more seconds to finish your poll if you haven't already. All right.
The poll is closed now, so I've shared the answers.
Okay, thanks. So it looks like there's a lot of options here. So it looks like the majority of folks are in the some using the outside but not in a formal way category, which is what I suspected. I'm glad to see there were more people who responded that new infrastructure and systems are in place and that many classes are using the school grounds for teaching. So that's good to hear. Awesome. Okay. Thanks for that. That'll help the panelists as they share. So Sharon, I'm going to pass the ball to you and pull up your slides. Make sure you can see your slides here. So as I mentioned, Sharon is with us, and we've been happy to partner with Green Schoolyards America on this event. For those who don't know Sharon, she's an environmental city planner and CEO and founder of Green Schoolyards America. As I mentioned, she's also been coordinating the national COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative. And since 1999, her professional work and passion have focused on transforming school grounds into vibrant public spaces, and now is really focused on scaling up this schoolyard movement at the national level. Sharon, do you want me to, I'm seeing my slides right now. I'm going to pull up, if you go to the top of the screen, you see viewing USGBC slides. Do you see that? Okay. Click on that little arrow down, and you should be able to pull up yours as the first one in the list. There you go. Now I'm seeing your slides.
Good. How do I make it go to the beginning?
Oh, in the little side panel, if you can do that way, or you can type 01 in the little side panel.
Well, almost there. Sorry.
Almost there. Sorry, guys.
Haven't used this platform before.
There we go.
Thanks.
Take it away.
to be here with you today and to partner on this, and to be here with everyone who's co-presenting and with all of you who came today to listen. My name is Sharon Banks, and I'm the director of Green Schoolyards America. And Green Schoolyards America is an organization, is a nonprofit organization that is working in normal times to transform asphalt-covered school grounds into park-like green spaces, to improve children's well-being, learning, and play while contributing to the ecological health and resilience of their cities. So we're equally interested in children's education and health and community access to open space and ecological design. I should say, too, I'm an environmental city planner with a background in city planning and landscape architecture as well. And so I approach school grounds from a city planning perspective. And our organization focuses on doing research about school ground design and policy change, and we also support school districts in making systemic changes to help them think as land managers and shift the land use of all their district property toward an end that creates benefits for kids, communities, and the environment. And so, in general, we envision a future in which all kids have daily access to nature where they are every day. We want them to be able to have hands-on learning resources, invigorating and robust play environments, and great social opportunities. We'd like we focus on green infrastructure, and we want the environment of our cities to improve. And so we look for ways that school ground land can be used to improve watersheds and rich wildlife habitats and improve climate mitigation and air quality. And we're also envisioning a future where the community has access to this green space and open space, that school grounds are welcoming centers for their communities to come to after hours. And so this is the work we normally do, and the work I've been focused on doing, I'd say, for the last 20 years in different ways. But in this time, and this crazy, challenging time that we're all in, we have shifted our work to more of a triage moment to help, I'd say, help schools and districts respond to this crisis in a way that's consistent with our long-term vision to help kids get outside and improve the environment of schools, but specifically is focused on what we can do right now to make the situation better for schools and districts. So the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative was born in June, as Phoebe mentioned, and it was co-founded by Green Schoolyards America, the Lawrence Health Science, San Mateo County Office of Education, and KenSpan. And we've since been joined by about 20 other organizations that are helping to lead this initiative. And we're thrilled to have about 500 volunteers helping us on various aspects of the project. So it's grown exponentially in a really short amount of time. Our overall mission is to support schools and districts around the country in their efforts to reopen safely and equitably, using outdoor spaces as strategic and cost-effective tools that maximize the number of kids who can come back to campus with physical distancing in place. And we're seeking to improve the outcomes both for learning, but also for mental and physical health and kids' happiness and teachers' happiness too. So just putting this in context, for those that don't work at schools, why is it difficult to reopen? We know that pretty much none of our schools in the country were built to accommodate kids 6 feet apart, so there's a space issue. The National Council on School Facilities estimates that only about 60% of the kids could fit inside the building in their normal classes. And at the same time, our schools weren't built with ventilation systems that were designed to filter a pandemic virus. So we have air quality problems for this reason in most of our schools. We also know from what we learned last spring and that online learning is devastating for many students. We know that it's closing schools is disproportionately affecting the kids who are already the most vulnerable, and that it leaves many kids without a safe, stable place to go, and it exacerbates the inequalities that are already being faced. We know that there's widespread learning loss in kids not being able to connect to the internet in general, and we have the statistics for California alone that about 29% of the students that live in our state live in homes without high-speed internet access. So no matter how good we make online education, that 29% is probably not receiving it. And it's an enormous equity issue. And in California, we're one of the tech centers of the world. If that's the sad state here, I imagine it's similar elsewhere. And we also at this time know that there's a mental health crisis with kids being under stress, having trauma from this time period, maybe illness in their family and social isolation. We know that everybody's moving less, sitting more, and that also that parents can't go back to work if they're supervising online learning. And so we see outdoor learning as something that can help address these concerns in a lot of ways. Just being outside has better air ventilation, which reduces the risk of virus transmission. There's more space to meet, so kids don't have to stay seated all the time in their 6-foot diagrams, that 6-foot seating charts that are being drawn for interiors of schools. They can get up and move around, which is much more practical. We know that we can place outdoor seating areas near interesting things that can be studied as part of the curriculum if schools so choose, and that being outside itself with improved access to nature in particular has therapeutic mental health benefits that reduce stress and restore kids' ability to pay attention, which is very important in this time that's very stressful and mental health crisis. We think that this type of outdoor learning in general is useful at any scale. It could just be one teacher taking a class outside for a given lesson, or it could be an entire school, an entire district thinking about how everyone could be outside most of the time. It's also not just suitable for the outdoor classrooms themselves, but also for PE and recess, lunch and other meals, specialty programs, before and after school programs. They all could find a place outside. In general, as an initiative, we're trying to reframe what schools and districts are looking at as Plan A. What's the first thing they default to when they come back? What if that could be outdoor learning? How do we enable schools to use outdoor learning as the new Plan A? And then think about online and inside options as Plan B, where they go to if conditions aren't right for being outside. So our goal is to help schools and districts create plans to move as many classes and school programs as possible into school grounds and parks and other nearby spaces if they don't have enough space on site, using low-cost materials to create outdoor classrooms and investing in permanent resources if they plan to use them in the long term, and also helping them plan for local weather conditions, whether it's heat or rain or snow or wind. We, as an initiative, we're focusing on prioritizing equity and trying to address the inequalities in our system up front, and to say that just bringing kids back is in and of itself a way to make equity a priority. And if school districts are reopening gradually, as many need to because they can't simultaneously reopen every school, we hope that they will prioritize the most vulnerable students with the highest needs to be in person, come back first. And to include the whole school community in the decision-making process for what they'd like outdoor learning to look like if we can, and to think too about outdoor clothing as a component of outdoor infrastructure. It's not just about having places to sit and a tent over your head. It's also about being warm and dry and having everyone be equally warm and dry with winter coats and rain boots and things like that. So helping school districts consider that as something that they might purchase as well as seating and shelter. Our initiative has a statement of equity on our website that I invite you to look at, and it's the guiding statement that we're using to shape our work. So our work is, since June, we've been inviting the public to participate in 10 working groups, which are focused on all different facets of this project. And our goal overall is to turn our website into an online free how-to manual that would help a school or district who would like to do outdoor learning move forward with those plans with whatever resources at hand they need. And so each working group is around the outside of this ring is producing materials related to those topics. We also have Group 11 there in the center, which is a community of practice for early adopter schools and districts, which Jessica and Justin, who are on the call today, have been participating in. And it's a place where people can come and share their ideas and talk to one another and hear what's happening in other places. So our website already has some of the resources we're producing online. There's probably 100 more pieces in development that we will be posting in the next, I think, as soon as possible, but definitely within the next 4 to 6 weeks. Working Group 11, our community practice, will continue to meet through the rest of the fall through mid-December, and it meets every other week, and you're very welcome to join us if you'd like to be part of the conversation, and the link is there, and maybe we'll start it in the chat. And the kinds of things that are on our website, I'll just step through a couple of those really quickly. We've got a tool on the school infrastructure page. There's a tool to download to for a principal and a school or school community members to walk the site of their campus and figure out, to help them assess what they have that they can use and what their needs are and their goals are. We have tools to look at how much space a class outside would take up. And then we have some examples of what it looks like when you start trying to do some site planning that way, assessing the campus that you're looking at, how many kids are there, how many classes are there. This particular example is from Virginia, where the school was considering 820 kids outside and 33 classes. And so the tool suggests people look at all the spaces they have that might be suitable, what kind of flat surfaces, what kind of seating already exists, and documenting that. And then considering where the easiest places are right away. Where could you fit people tomorrow if you just had another couple benches or if you already have seating? So that's what this map is, the low cost map. And then this map is an example of if you really wanted to seat a lot more classes. This is 32 of the classes shown in scale with those seating charts, and the yellow is a conceptual tent over it to keep the rain off and the sun out. And so this is a kind of a moderate investment model or bigger investment model. And then if they really wanted every class to fit on site, in this case, on the left side, they would need to make some clearings in their forest and put up a fence between the edge of the campus and the road. So that's the bigger investment if they really wanted to do that with the school. And it's also trying to keep the field open for PE and other outdoor meal service and things. So not every space on the interior of campus is taken. And so here we've color-coded those three categories of easy, medium, and harder with color. And then the next diagram shows and they assessed those sites for what they had and what they needed. Sorry if that's a little fuzzy. And we've got cost estimate charts on our website that you can download and look at and customize with your own local vendors to look at how many of what you need and what the total cost estimate might be. And then some of the tools on our website too are things about, thinking about, well, what if you don't want to build infrastructure? What if you want a mobile outdoor classroom where kids could all have something soft to sit on, whether it's a seat cushion or a yoga mat or a picnic blanket, and they bring their own water bottle and clipboards and go to the park or go to a part of the campus that doesn't need to be renovated. So lists of mobile outdoor classroom gear and teacher supplies that might be moved around in a wagon. We also have a program. About half of the volunteers in our system are members of the Emergency Schoolyard Design Volunteer Group, which are design professionals from around the country who have volunteered to help schools make site diagrams like the ones I was just showing you. They're communication tools, not construction drawings, but communication tools that will help a school to consider what its options are and then share that with their school community to build consensus for step one of their project. And so if you are a designer who would like to join us in that, there's a link to sign up to help with the design. And if you're a school that would like help and a thought partner in that, there's a link for schools to sign up as well. On our website, we also have, two doctors did a webinar with us on outdoor learning and health and the specific questions that relate to managing outdoor spaces during COVID. And so that we recommend that if you're interested in finding out more about the health details. We have a brand new working group that just started that we also are looking for participants for, that I'd like to invite you to join us if this is an interest of yours. We realize that when everybody has their masks off during meal times is probably the highest transmission period of the day. So we want to help create materials that support having lunch outside. And so we're convening a group for a quick, to pull together some materials in the next month that we can share on that topic. So if you'd like to join us, there's a link there. And then lastly, I just have an example of my colleague's school here in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's called Boulder Education, and the director is Yalda Modaber. And it's an independent school that serves 100 kids in pre-K to third grade, and they were one of the first to reopen. They reopened preschool and summer camps June 22nd, and they have been open since then. They're open for school now. They received a waiver to open earlier than most of the schools in California. And they did very careful planning processes. They sourced supplies and PPE. They formed a task force that included each of the school's departments, parents, and coronavirus clinical experts to give them medical advice. They surveyed parents and staff. They wrote and implemented a COVID-19 safety protocol, which is linked on our website and on theirs as well, that governs how they act on site and keeps people keeps transmission down. They coordinate regularly scheduled meetings for parents and staff, and they built many outdoor spaces. They had some already, and they built more. And their health protocol has been tested a few times where a case from the outside was present in a teacher's household, and the teacher might have gotten it but did not transmit it to their community. It did not spread, which is exactly what a protocol is supposed to do. So if you want to recommend looking at their protocol, it's really excellent. And so just a few pictures from their site. They have all different kinds of outdoor classroom spaces, and this one is just an example of a school looking at what do you have in your basement that you could take out and use right now, and these desks were leftover things that they had. So that's what they are doing there under a tent they brought in. And then they created some purpose-built outdoor spaces like this one, which is they have shipping pallets on the bottom covered by wool rugs, surrounded by this tree stumps that they purchased that are made to be desks and chairs. And they use both the middle surface and the edges, and it's under a tent that they put up. You can see a yurt in the background, which is another environment that they added. Here's another one of the outdoor classroom spaces. And then they have a number of indoor-outdoor classrooms that are part of their building design. A whole wall to the left, out of the frame of this picture, the whole glass wall. There's a whole glass wall edge of their classroom that folds away, and so this is an extension of the classroom, but it's where they have their meals outside. And their garden program is continuing at this time. They've got a nature playground, so the kids can touch surfaces like this, which are low transmission, and do activities outdoors. And so in closing, I would just say investing in outdoor learning for COVID is a step in general toward a greener, healthier future that's better for kids and their communities and their planet. It's worth doing right now, much needed right now, but will also reap benefits later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. The resources are incredible. I encourage you all to check out their website. Anissa dropped a bunch of links in the chat. And again, we'll share those in an email as a part of our follow-up. All those links will also should be shared there. So you have access to them in one place. I absolutely want to go to that school or have my daughter go to that school in California. That was amazing. We all know that weather is not practical for everyone across the country. And we're going to hear from Justin next, who's in Falmouth, Maine. But first, we're going to open another poll to understand what your biggest barriers are to implementing outdoor education and outdoor learning. So I need to just open that poll, so you should see that on your side panel there. So what are your biggest barriers to impacting the implementation of more outdoor learning in your school or district? And if none of those apply, you can select other. I'll give you just a minute to finish this. And if you have questions for Sharon or comments for Sharon, feel free to drop those in the chat. She can respond to some of those when Justin's presenting.
Okay, I'm going to close it, but you should have another couple seconds to answer after I close.
Okay. 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 Looks like the weather is a big barrier, which is not surprising, and we'll hear from two school systems in relatively cold climates next. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Also high on the list was not enough money or infrastructure, which we're hoping will change with potentially some funding from the federal government next several months or so. And then another high on the list was not enough time or staff to dedicate to this work, which we recognize is definitely needed. So I think those look like the top three barriers. So, all right, thank you so much for sharing with us, and that'll help the presenters, as I mentioned, as they dive into their presentations. Can you all see my slides? Okay.
So I'm going to transition to Justin's presentation now, and he's going to walk us through his amazing work in Falmouth, Maine. They've been open for at least a month now, over a month, and have been doing some really incredible work outdoors. So I'm excited for him to be able to share his story. So take it away, Justin.
All right, thank you, Phoebe, and thank you, Sharon. I have nothing left to say after everything that Sharon said. So I reiterate that their work is a fantastic resource. So so I work for Falmouth Public Schools in Falmouth, Maine, and we're one of the wealthier districts in the state, which may or may not skew our experience a little bit. It allows us a little bit of latitude for some things. There's 3 schools here: the elementary, middle, and high school. About 2,300 students, and we do have some pre-K there. And we had an existing farm-to-school team. I was the garden greenhouse coordinator for that group. And we had sort of a 3-prong approach with farm-to-school: food procurement for the cafeterias, school gardens, and education. And so I took a role in all of those, in all the different schools. And that gave me a somewhat unique perspective across the campus in this role, to be able to kind of leap on educating children outdoors. And we did have a few sort of informal, I would say, efforts. We had a few teachers that would take kids outside, and one teacher, Cass Lynn, who had done some fundraising years ago and built an outdoor classroom space and garden space for those things. So we already had some motion in that direction, and COVID sort of gave us a chance to pivot quickly into something new. So in July of this year, while we were all anxious about what was going to happen in September when we opened, there was a webinar put out by the Nature-Based Education Consortium and the Maine Summer Camp organization, all about outdoor education and how could that be used to help schools open. And I sent out an email to all staff at that time, and we had about 30 of our teachers, and again, we're just shooting for teachers here, join in. And I'm not exactly sure how many went to the webinar itself, but we had about 30 join our team, which we're calling ECO, or Educating Children Outdoors, and I may have stolen that from somebody else in New Hampshire, so my props to them. And I forgot to mention that we are a hybrid model currently in the school. So we have half the population, or half the student population is on campus, a little bit less than that, because we have a few students that are choosing to stay home or be distanced full time. And then it either alternates days, or in the elementary school, there's an AM and PM cohort. So throughout the day in the elementary school, all the kids are here at some point, but they're only here for half the time. So we sort of get these little windows of opportunities for teachers to connect with students, which in the end has turned out really quite well for being outdoors, because taking off masks and things like that helps teachers to connect much more effectively. And I think that ties into a lot of what Sharon was talking about in terms of mental health and as well. So being able to really connect to somebody without a mask on, which we are on campus, we can only do outdoors. I do recommend, if you're interested, by the way, if you like watching webinars, I have a link to the webinar that the Nature-Based Education Consortium put together in July, and they introduced a few great movies about schools in New Hampshire and Vermont are doing outdoor education long before the pandemic happened. So it sort of got us really thinking about things. And at this time in July, also, we were sort of working as a group of just teachers ourselves on the team, but we were getting sort of verbal support more or less from administration. So we were able to make things happen quickly here because of that support, both from the top down as well as building up our own structure of teachers from below. One of the things that was most important for us initially, as we met regularly, was to just figure out what are we doing, because I mean, if you look at some of the beautiful pictures that Sharon has, it's really nice to have these like warm, fuzzy feelings about what it's like to be outside, but how could we make that happen? And we knew we had a very short window of time, so we focused, we reviewed our statement of purpose regularly. And so really we were trying to create, beyond just sort of creating some spaces and providing some chairs, it was to try to affect the culture across the campus to provide outdoor education, both during the pandemic and then to be able to take advantage of it and move beyond the pandemic itself in trying to provide authentic learning experiences for children, for students. And again, as Sharon said, really have that mental and I'll say spiritual health of being outside as well. So to do this, we felt that it was important to, you saw some great maps that Sharon had of the little dots on the map, and I'll go into that in a bit, but we wanted to identify potential outdoor spaces and what improvements needed to make those spaces effective. And then what sort of things did teachers need to enable going outside? Did they need certain tools, or did they need chairs, or what was it that was needed? And again, because we were a group of teachers, we could kind of take that approach from what do we need as teachers, although I'm not technically a teacher, but our group was. So, and then we wanted to be able to begin a dialogue with administration across the board. So all the schools, the central office, working with our police and school resource officer, and trying to work with the fire department to make sure we are addressing concerns early on in the process. And so we were trying to do that in July and August before we started moving forward, spending money or anything. One of the key factors for us to work with, to sort of appease administration, so to speak, was scheduling, so that teachers could schedule spaces, because we'd have less, in theory, we'd have less spaces outdoors, at least ones that are built up than there are classes. And then the administrative staff or the administrators themselves would be able to locate where the teacher would be if they've gone outside. So if we're having an open campus, our campus has all the buildings on one, but if in theory, if a teacher is in a separate eco space, they need to be located if there's an emergency, or if they just need to find a student or get in touch with the staff. So kind of figuring out that system really seemed like a keystone point for us. We're also working to develop sample curricula in a couple of the different schools, just to kind of, again, to enable teachers. It's all about enabling teachers on our end. And then we've been working on developing, and we have done some guidelines and expectations for teachers to be able to present to the kids, because again, we're trying to change the culture. So we want to sort of make going outdoors not be a field trip like it may have been previously in some ways. Oh, we're going to go outside for a nice walk. Instead, it's just a continuation of the classroom. So the norm is to be outside. So then we have less maybe behavioral issues around distractions and things like that. And if we can kind of create that culture. And then the last point was to deal with fundraising, which we were ready to take it by the horns and roll with it. But it turned out that there was some of the funding from CARES that was going to be available for some of this. And our CFO and superintendent were very supportive of that. So we were able to get some money allocated to our district. And I think that just comes from that's a smart expense on their part. I think this is this is something that'll pay dividends beyond this fall. And we also did have, we're also working to try and get some of our expenses to be just part of the regular school budget, if we have to maintain our spaces or buy new supplies as well. So thinking down the road. So first of all, when we were identifying our spaces, I have a little map here, but we identified easily probably about 90 spaces across the campus. And you can see on the little image on this slide that we did stay off of the athletic areas, although people do use them kind of informally, and the athletic director has said it's fine to use it at certain times. But we were really kind of focused around the schools for a number of reasons. But again, we found about 90, and sometimes they might be just under a tree or just near a certain wall or something like that. So they're not necessarily amazing spaces. So like Sharon said, you just look for flat spaces, or you look for maybe easy accessible, or places, again, that teachers, because it was teachers walking around campus, it was spaces that teachers felt like they could use to educate. And we also identified what each of these spaces needed. So we said shade. So what's it going to be? Or sorry, which of these? Let me back up. But what resources were available on the space already, and then what might be needed? So some may be, like I said, natural shade. Whether we need to put up a tent or a canopy or shade cloth. If rain covering would help. what kind of seating might be available. And Wi-Fi has become something that we thought we had better, but we found now that, oops, maybe we didn't have as quite good Wi-Fi. So that's something we're sort of adding into our next round of funding to be able to improve that a little bit outside. And then electricity, especially the higher level grades in high school are really more dependent on having some sort, electricity for recharging computers, or there have even been teachers who've brought in, TVs that they've purchased on their own. But we are looking down the road at expanding that out even more. So, and then each space on our map is uniquely identified by building and a number, as well as the longitude and latitude of the space. And all this was put into mymaps.google.com that we created and then shared with our district, so teachers could zoom in on a map and look at where the space is and then click on it and be able to get a picture of that space as well. And all of that was driven by a spreadsheet in the back end. And again, by being able to have that sort of information that we could then present to administration, or at least a template of how we were going to be presenting, or a template of what we were going to be doing, we had the buy-in then from the administration at that point.
Justin, sorry to interrupt, but there was a question about whether teachers were okay with having class so close together. Back to that map, I don't know if all those spots are for class.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sorry I missed it pop up on the chat there.
Okay.
That definitely became a concern, especially for the high school and the middle school. The belief was that in the elementary school there would be a little bit easier to wrangle the kids. So that did come up. Some of those, even though those spaces look very dense, it's partly because I zoomed out for the whole map. But we were definitely cognizant of like what kind of, like, if there's a corner of a building and two classes on either side of that corner, was that enough to be able to create a spacing distance as well? And as much as lesson learned here is, as much as we've tried to sort of have it be where teachers check out a space and go to that space and that's it, we have had a lot of sort of teachers, which I love, is just teachers going outside and improvising. So maybe somebody took their space and they were willing to go to another space or something like that. So kind of a little bit of migrating around. But the key has been that they're communicating back to the main office of where they're at. And we have cell phones, and we're going to be buying more radios and things like that for communicating those types of things. So, and that actually kind of ties in with my next section, which was each school sort of has its own culture. And as the coordinator for the gardens and greenhouse such, I sort of had a bigger picture, but every school had its own culture. And because we had teachers from each of the schools there, we could have the high school teachers say, we need to have this sort of a space, and they wanted to have a different type of canopy than perhaps the elementary school was needing or wanting. So as an example, the elementary school, we thought every kid is based out of their classroom, right? They're not necessarily migrating around during the day to different classrooms like you might in high school and middle school. So we were able to create these little, what we're calling jobs or jump outside bags. And there's a picture here of a girl kind of checking out the contents of the brand new bag. So it was a backpack that's been printed, a little yoga mat that's been cut in half, whiteboard, clipboard, dry erase marker with eraser, and hand sanitizer. There might be a few art supplies in some of the grades as well, some like watercolors and a few other odds and ends in there. And the idea is that these are all stored in the classroom. There's no sanitizing between each one. Every kid gets their own assigned bag. They're numbered. And so the teacher can just say, okay, we're going outside, so grab your bags, kids, and they can just grab it and know that what they need is in there. The middle school, we didn't do the bags because kids were already lugging around a big giant bag, and because they tend to move around from classroom to classroom, so we cut it back a little bit to just a yoga mat, the whiteboard, clipboard, and the dry erase marker. So we didn't do that. And unfortunately, the high school actually had nothing. They decided it was too different, and students didn't need anything themselves. But one of the other infrastructure pieces that we had were seating. And you look at pictures of straw bales and logs and everything else, and they're nice. I won't complain about them too much. But our lessons learned since September when we opened, our logs are not all that comfortable for a longer period. Even with a little yoga mat folded up on it, they were sort of a little bit uncomfortable, especially for the older kids. Yoga mats worked well for elementary kids. I think the middle school students, more or less, they would maybe not bring them in, or they just didn't really care for them. And then straw bales look great in pictures, but they can be expensive. They're not super durable. And if you get a sixth grader that sees a slightly compromised straw bale, they're like a wolverine attacking it and will just destroy it. And then we also ran into some issues about having straw bales under or even within 10 feet of tents and having fire code issues. So picnic tables, and I know I'm running out of time here, but picnic tables, we ended up doing a program with a local picnic table builder, and there was parents could pay for the table, and then the builder would just ship them all at once to the school, and so we didn't have to pay for it or anything like that, and we're going to get little placards printed up saying they are. And then we ended up we found that these Hercules brand folding chairs, which I can provide a link to later if you want, you can just find them on Amazon. So about $15 a pop for a chair. They work fairly well. They have drainage holes. We fold them up. They can go off to the side, so they can really be used anywhere. These are some examples. I have more on these slides, and I'm not sure how much you want me to keep going on this, CV, but just a couple more slides.
Yeah, no, this is really helpful. So take some time to.
I don't want to. Okay. All right. So we ended up going. We built out 11 shade structures like the ones you see on the screen here. They each cost in total about $2,200, including hardware and the poles. We use cedar poles. Really, like, these could be better designed. I saw there were some like designers and architects. These could be better built out, but these are waterproof, heavy sails from a local sail maker. So we were really trying to kind of go for that. And they're pretty regularly used. There's a couple that aren't used just because it turns out that even though it's in a nice spot, it's just not a spot that people would use on campus. But the two you see on the screen and on the next slide actually are really used every day throughout the day. So we use local cedar poles from Maine. Again, we were sort of, I had a little bit of an idea of like, why don't we send some of this federal money to local people? So we went with a local sailmaker and local cedar poles and a local farmer for straw bales, things like that. More of those shade coverings being used. And then we're also putting in some of these canopies. The picture you see here is actually over one of our little outdoor kitchen spaces. I'm sorry it's such a mess, but that's just how my life is right now. This is a smaller version of the canopies we've purchased for the high school. And the price went up quite a bit. They're usually maybe about $1,600 for an 18-foot by 30-foot one. But the price went up a lot because we had to get a fire-rated fabric. So it went up to about $2,300 for that size. And these are going to primarily be used at the high school. They'll provide rain coverage. They also have sidewalls that you can put up. So, and really, the whole goal of what we're trying to do is to enable teachers to be outside as much as possible. So again, as Sharon said, sometimes you just got to find a space. And so when we had to pull our straw bales out from under the tent for the fire department, we just chose some of the spaces that we hadn't necessarily improved in any way and just put the straw bales there. And that's what gets used here. This is an example of, I don't know, who knows, I'm not even sure it's a middle school class, but they were just outside making use of that space. And it really, you can see the students get the chance to take off their mask and interact with each other in that way. Moving forward, which I don't have a slide on, moving forward, we're looking at doing some fundraisers to buy some winter gear. Being in Maine, we do have LL Bean here, so I'm hoping that we can kind of develop a relationship with them, maybe buying some winter gear for students in need. But overall, I'm hoping that I had been taking the philosophy of there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad apparel or bad clothing. But I'm not sure that that's actually, I think it's a bit naive. But I do believe that a good percentage of the population of this town, at least, expect their kids to stand on the side of a mountain and go skiing for the weekend. So it's certainly reasonable for them to be properly dressed in school for a couple of hours to be able to go outside. And so now we're working with teachers on how to do that. We do have another round of the CARES Act funds coming through that we're hoping some of it will make our way. And it's actually the proposal for all that was due today. And then we're looking at I'm currently sitting in our greenhouse. We have a small greenhouse, and then this one's a little bit larger. I'm hoping to build out 3 more that are about this size on campus and use them. And we're going to have to talk with the fire department about that because they can't be dedicated classroom space. But we already have an existing farm to school program, so we're going to be using it. And I believe that that was all that I had at this point. I do just want to tell people, if you're new at this, just making little changes and figuring out how to enable, and don't be defeated by, oh, we don't have the money or the weather's bad or something like that. Just trying to make the little changes to move things forward is what's really important. And the more you can start changing that culture and getting teachers to think, oh yeah, we could have a in classroom time, and then we could have a walking discussion time outside. And even if it's 15 to 20 minutes outside, that's a step forward from where we have been in the past. So I believe that's all that I had at this point.
Great. Thank you so much, Justin. It's incredible to just hear. I was like having a running list of all of the little points that you're making that are just so relevant and helpful to hear from someone who's been doing this on the ground. So we can revisit some of those hopefully in the Q&A time. Bailey, I saw your question. I'm going to hold that question so that we can ask both Justin and also Gita at the end, okay?
Phoebe, there are actually quite a lot of questions in Q&A as well, so I'll hold on to those for after Gita and Lucas.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see. I'm going to advance the slides so you guys can see this. So next up, as I mentioned, we're going to hear from our friends in Boulder Valley School District. Gita Carroll is the sustainability coordinator at the school, and we also are joined today by the head of the school, Horizons K-8 school in the district. So Gita, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so we are located next slide, Phoebe. In Colorado, we have 56 schools with, and you know what, my next slide isn't going, sorry. Sorry, bear with me for a second. Okay, for roughly 4 million square feet of operations, and we're in 9 municipalities. So it's not just the city of Boulder, which is often mistaken. We're 9 cities and municipalities and 3 counties, and we have 27,000 students and about 4,000 staff. We are just finishing up a large bond construction where all of our schools received some work, and we were able to do quite a bit of work on our HVAC systems with focus on IAQ and energy efficiency. And we prepare about 2 million meals per year. Next slide. So our district has had a commitment to sustainability for many decades, but for the last 10 years had our sustainability plan, which helps us set a vision for how we want to be incorporating sustainability as a district from education and an operations perspective. So it helps us align our goals with our local partners, establish meaningful measures, and just really coordinate as an organizational system around sustainability. And we are working on our 10-year plan, 10-year update to that plan this year. Next slide. So we closed down in March, like most of you, and spent the summer then really figuring out how we could get our kids back together safely. And we used resources such as the American Academy of Pediatrics, of course, CDC, local health organizations, so Boulder County Public Health, Denver Public Health, Harvard School of Public Health, and World Health Organization, and using as many resources as we can to try to figure out the best way to do this as safely as we can. And I will say that most, if not all of those resources do highly recommend using the outdoors to some capacity as a way to bring kids back safely. Next slide. So what our district first did was create a 5-phase plan, understanding that we would be somewhere in one of these phases in the next, as we're muddling through all of this, with the hopes of being able to kind of move easily from phase to phase based on new health data. So we put this out at the beginning of the summer, which phase 1 is an all remote scenario like we were in last March, and finish the school year remotely. And phase 5 would be back to normal, and phases 2 through 4 really hybrid variations of those 5 phases. And the goals behind all of these plans, first, are to ensure health, well-being, and safety of all students and staff. Second, to maximize student academic growth and achievement. Third, to provide supports to teacher and staff. And fourth, to assure operational and financial viability. So those are behind all of our 5 phases as we try to figure out how to move forward. Next slide. So in late July, we announced that we would be starting in phase 3, which was a hybrid learning model. And in August, before school started, maybe a week or two before, that was quickly changed to sort of a phase 1+. And this was due to local health data and operational constraints. So it was a big kind of last minute shift. And then, so we've been basically, all of our students are virtual. They have been used to some capacity. There was limited high school athletics. There was childcare on our site starting at that point, and we've been doing emergency food preparation throughout since March. So there have been people on our sites, but most of our students started virtually. Since reopening in mid-August, we had a group kind of actively planning how to get our students back in person, continuing to plan for this. So the first recommendation was to bring our K-2 students back and to allow the students to use outdoors. That was the first recommendation brought to the board, and both of those things began on September 29th. So we've had our K-2 in, and schools were now able to use the outdoors. So we had a couple different capacities then. So our K-2 might be using them for their in-person learning. And, you know, in theory, for the 3 through 12, the outdoors were open to bring students in, you know, as part of their clubs or groups, or maybe one-off with students, and kind of whatever creative ways teachers and schools wanted to use those spaces. The rest of our students, so that the next kind of phase in our reintroduction plan is that the rest of our students will be coming back in phases in the next few weeks. So next week, the rest of our elementary kids are coming back 4 days a week. And so our elementary schools will basically be at full capacity for 4 days a week instead of 5. And then any student has the opportunity to continue virtually that they would like. So we have a lot of students taking that option. 9th and 6th graders are coming back next week. And then the rest of our secondary kids will be coming back. So middle school will be 2 days a week, and high school will be 1 day a week for all of those students. So kind of switching back to the outdoor learning piece, again, since last March, we have been kind of working on how we could integrate learning outdoors to help our district meet the priorities that they set out with in that 5-phase plan and getting kids back. So the first thing that we did was we created a document outlining our existing designated outdoor learning spaces. So that's that first link, and we're happy to share any of these links. And so we were really excited to confirm that most of our schools did have at least one designated space for this purpose. And this was, you know, schools have done this over the years through grants or through their parent community or through a lot through bond work and construction work. So we took this list and we noted seating, shading, and other features, and included how many people could fit. The next step after this was, you know, these are great spaces, but we knew if we were going to have a lot of our kids back, we need a lot more than one area. So we then looked at our locations, other locations on our site that could be easily modified to be an outdoor learning space. So any space with existing shading, which was maybe from a tree or maybe from the building, or where seating could be added, like, you know, near a door, would be easy to bring chairs in and out. And as summer went on, we began to solidify the work with partners also interested in supporting this work. So this included members from local cities and parks and rec departments, a group called Growing Up Boulder that I'll talk a little bit more about, environmental educators in our community, all with interest in, you know, how they could support our schools in this transition. And with this group, we identified nearby parks and features that schools and teachers could potentially use. And we made a fun discovery, if you go to the next slide, Phoebe, that you can use Google Maps and you can search for your school and then layer on a search for parks, and it'll come up with nearby parks and green spaces, and also have links if you click on them to like what types of features they have there. So it says like there's Wi-Fi and there's seating. So that was a fun discovery as well. I will say that we're not there yet as a district. We're really still focusing on students on our sites, but as we continue to move forward, it's awesome to know that there's that as a resource as well. Okay, next slide shows an example of one of our elementary schools and how they mapped out their their property, and this is with the K through 2 on site. So they identified what spaces could be used by what grade level and for what purpose. They did separate out their playgrounds for recess time and PE time to be able to still have those available. So similar to the types of things that the other speakers have talked about, but we've got schools doing this as well. Next slide. So this is example of some of the site walks we've done. So when we get requests from schools for wanting more support, we go to the site and we kind of walk around and help identify the areas that will be good spaces. So here's shading right around the building that could be used. There's some seating, and some of those seating could be added. The next slide are just kind of additional areas around the site where green spaces or seating a little further away under trees. The slide in the lower right-hand corner, I like to show because often, principals or administrators are used to looking at their site and thinking of the outdoors as, okay, where are the fields where the kids are going to play or where are the play structure? So, they're looking at that big field and saying, we can't do outdoor learning because there's no shade and we would need tents. But when we walk the site, we go further back and you can see all those trees lining the perimeter of the property, and that's actually a lovely space to bring kids. So it's just looking at the site a little bit differently than they're used to looking at it, to be able to identify spaces that might work for this. Okay, next slide. And of course, the gardens that we have in a lot of our schools make lovely areas to bring kids for outdoor learning. Next slide shows another, this is one of our actual outdoor learning classrooms and kids using that space as well. Okay, so I have to say that we have been participating in the national working group run by the Green Schoolyards throughout the whole summer, and it has been so valuable, and I would encourage anybody from a school or district wanting to make this work to pop in on those calls in some fashion or another, because the resources that Sharon has presented, we've integrated those as we can. So as we're communicating to our schools, we have shared their tools. So the cost estimate tool, the campus assessment tool, the configuration options. So Sharon shared that, here's different ways you can sit outside. That has been really popular. And sometimes, for teachers or schools who this is new to, just saying like, okay, here's how you can define your space and here's how you can sit. And walking them through that is all they need to be able to visualize how to make it happen. So awesome resources, and Sharon, thanks for the work that you've done around all of that. And the next slide, another thing we did at the beginning of the summer was survey our environmental education partners for what they could offer. So a lot of these groups are used to coming to our schools and working with kids, which at the moment is off limits. But they wanted to continue to support us. So they are offering virtual learning, kind of virtual field trips, having local scientists available virtually. They're offering support for teachers, like kind of PD, how to lead activities outside or how to manage students outdoors. And they're also doing a lot to support families while we're kind of in this hybrid model for when they're not in school. So we were able to share these results too with our principals when they returned in August to say, as another tool for how we're supporting this work. And we wanted to pull together as much as we could for the principals as soon as they got back in August around outdoor learning, so that as they were trying to figure out how to use their spaces and make this work at their schools, that the outdoors were actively being considered as a piece of that puzzle. We also asked principals to identify someone who could help coordinate the use of these shared spaces, just as they would with gymnasiums or cafeterias or libraries in a normal year. With the outdoors, you also have to have some level of coordination about who is going to be where. And unfortunately, during these COVID times, it gets even more complicated than that, because if there's a group who's not an in-person learning, like our K through 2 coming to the site, we still need to make sure we have all the health data for all of those kids. We need to make sure there's somebody on site who can meet the health needs. We need to make sure they have access to a restroom if they need it, even though they're outdoors. And if they're accessing a restroom, then we need to make sure it's not then mingling with the kids who are on site. So, that level of COVID coordination is complicated and another important thing that someone needs to be thinking about.
So we just, next slide, been making the case, internally and externally through our district documents around outdoor learning. We now have, specifically guidance for using the outdoors on BVSD sites that have been shared and reshared and updated and re-updated. We created a form for principals to complete if they want more information. So this has helped us identify what types of barriers the schools were coming up against and which schools were interested in doing this. So, we know that, unfortunately, with kids half hybrid and half in person and teachers having to teach to both, that makes going outdoors complicated because it's harder to teach those kids. You've got to be connected. So we do have some solutions around that. I mean, our IT department has been able to expand Wi-Fi kind of beyond the border of the school for those schools who have requested it. We have some schools and teachers, I think, who are kind of taking their phones and using that, and we'll continue to address those things as they come up. And the next slide is just a snapshot of the survey that we have available, and again, happy to share that survey. I think based on time, I'm going to just skip through these next couple slides, which is really focused on all the partners in our community and how they've been helping. One of the partners just led a group of community leaders in Spanish to hear about how their questions and concerns were around outdoor learning, which is, again, just really useful in helping us kind of address some of those barriers. And on slide 21, then I will hand it over to Lucas.
Thanks so much, Geeta. Appreciate it. And I just have a few minutes, so I would love to just talk you through what this has looked like at Horizon. So this is a picture of our campus and our outdoor learning spaces. We purchased 12 tents, 20 by 30 tents that allowed for our K2 students to come back, and we're slowly bringing our 7-8 students are here in the afternoon now, and our 3, 4, and 5, 6 students will be back within the next 2 weeks. But we really wanted to talk through why outdoor learning, why it was important for our community. We surveyed our parents, and our parents really felt strongly that being outside was safer. Medical experts also agree. And so we felt an obligation to provide that opportunity to them. And so over the summer, I worked with a group of 5 parents that we really worked through all the logistics of what it would take to get our outdoor learning spaces up. The other thing that we had happen was in BVSD, our teachers can qualify for a medical exemption if they are over 65 or they have underlying health conditions. And so we had about half of our K2 team that qualified for a medical exemption. And so that means that technically that they can work from home. And when we talked to those folks, they said, I'm not going to teach inside, but I do feel comfortable coming back indoors. So the outdoor spaces also allowed us to bring 100% of those teachers back, and they're currently teaching outside and feeling really comfortable and great about it. So that was another reason that we went outdoors. We also looked at health data, and we worked with a scientist at the University of Colorado that really focused on air quality. And so those are some of the main reasons. And then when we start to think about long-term, we want to keep these spaces up for the next 10 years, as long as the tents last. And, after, the COVID era, really utilize these spaces. And I think our teachers are really excited about integrating outdoor education and outdoor learning at Horizons long-term. So things have been going relatively well. What I can tell you is, at least initially, there was a lot of nervousness and hesitancy along our staff. I was in hours and hours of meetings with our K2 team, working through a lot of logistics and details, from what happens if a student runs into the street to what happens if a student is crying and needs a hug, to what happens if students take off their masks. And so we put a lot of protocols in place to allow our teachers to feel really comfortable. But now our teachers have slowly adapted and embraced outdoor learning, and several of our teachers have told me, I prefer to teach outside, actually. And as long as the weather permits, and even next year and the following years, I can imagine holding my class outside under a tent. So like I said before, we do have more grade levels coming back. Our 7th and 8th graders are under the tents now as we speak. And then 3-4 will come back next week, and then 5-6 will come back the following week. So K2 and 3-4 will be coming to school in the morning utilizing the tents, and then 5-6 and 7-8 will be coming in the afternoon and utilizing the tents. We really tried to prepare teachers, like I said before. So a lot of meetings, we established a lot of protocols, from how students exit their cars in the morning. Teachers, our K2 teachers string out ropes on the sidewalk, and they have little knots every 6 feet with the student's name. And so the students get out of the car, they go to their rope, and then they hold onto their rope, and that's how they get to and from their tents and to and from recess. So that's been a great strategy that's worked really well for us. We purchased tables, chairs, and carts that we are using to haul equipment back and forth. And then we also had to prepare families, so a lot of communication to teach them the protocols. We are wearing masks under the tents. We only take them off during snack time. And so that's been something that our parents have been helping us really support. And then we also needed to increase supervision, because I think that we heard from our parent community that they wanted to make sure that their students were safe. So we have administrators and other support staff around the tents with walkie-talkies, and we have emergency plans in place to allow everybody to feel safe. And then what we've learned, really the biggest thing that I can say is we really needed to I think it's unrealistic to expect teachers to replicate an indoor classroom experience outside. It's just they had to totally change their mindset about what it looks like, and I think that they're doing a great job of that. And so you can see that they're right next to one another, and so they had to. There's a lot more collaboration. There's a lot less direct instruction, because it's just a little harder to do that, but I think it's actually for the best. And so, a lot more students doing and a lot less teachers talking and doing, which I always think is really great. We also, had to come up with contingency plans in the case of poor weather. So we're dealing with really devastating wildfires in Colorado, and so we do have indoor spaces for when air quality gets bad. Or today there was about 25 and 30 mile an hour winds, and some of our tables and students were almost blowing over. And so we have indoor learning spaces that they can just go to for a brief reprieve. And we have worked with CU to make sure that we have the correct air filters and things like that in those spaces. But then they do just come right out as soon as they're able to. So they're outside over 90% of the time. And then I think the other thing that our teachers realize is just more physically demanding to be outside. And so they're really exhausted at the end of the day, but I think that they know that it's worth it, because it allows them to see their kids in person. And then just really quickly to close, the plan for the future, like I said, is we want to continue to utilize these outdoor spaces. I think one benefit of going through this pandemic is it's allowed us to really think of this is a sustainable, after this is all over. And so I can imagine, like Justin talked about, having a sign up system where teachers, sign out tents in hour or 2 hour chunks where they're really doing, some small group instruction. I can imagine that our social emotional learning groups are held outside underneath these tents. And I can also look forward to partnering with the district and with the city of Boulder in open space. They've actually created a curriculum we're on a park called Burke Park. And so created a curriculum, interdisciplinary curriculum that will allow our teachers K-8 to have our students explore our spaces around the school. So it's been definitely a labor of love and consumed a lot of our time, but now to see it up and running, when I come in at 7:30 in the morning and seeing their teachers pull their carts out and then see those kids walk to those tents every morning at 8 o'clock, I can tell you it's one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had as an educator. And our students are doing amazingly well and are following protocols. And so it's been extraordinary, and I would encourage you all, like all the rest of the people said, is I know it might not be realistic for some of you to scale up plans like this, but any way that you can get your kids outside, I just see that I see a shift, and it's been very positive. So thanks so much for having me, and I can I have another meeting at 3:30, but can hang out a bit to answer questions, or my contact information, feel free to reach out. I'd love to share resources. These are some of our K2 kids before we had tables. Now we have tables and chairs, but you can see kind of, what they're able to work on. Our first couple of days were beach party days because we didn't have tables and chairs, and so they even just brought beach blankets, and that was really great. So thanks so much, everybody. Oh, and then our local news station, our CBS, did a story on us, and so the link is embedded in the presentation. If you want to watch that, you can kind of see it a little more in action. So thank you.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Lucas. Yeah, Sharon, I agree. Like, it's awesome to see this work and hear from your from someone in your role to like share how gratifying and meaningful this is to you as a leader and to your teachers too. I mean, that's an amazing benefit that you were able to get 100% of your staff come back to school to teach because you shifted outdoors. That's awesome. Okay, Geeta, I know that you had a closing slide. Is there anything? Okay, you're good. All right, we have a bunch of questions that came in. Thank you to our panelists for answering some of those in the Q&A. But Anissa, I will defer to you if there's any questions for the whole group.
Yeah, there is, first of all, a great little back and forth about how to accommodate or what is being done to accommodate students with disabilities. So if that's of interest, you can go to the Q&A and look at what Justin and Sharon said about that. There were a couple questions on weather. So Lucas, I'm glad that you touched on the fact that you guys kind of have a backup plan indoors. And because of time, I'm going to just skip that one, actually. I know it's a big one, but there was a question about, I know a lot of schools are in hybrid mode right now, and they've got some students online and some in person. So there's a question that I think is probably applicable to a lot of folks about how you accommodate that while being outside. Anybody want to jump into that one?
I would love to jump in and talk through that one. We tried because we have about 15 students at K2 that are online, and we tried to do live streaming with them, and it was pretty challenging. And the best option actually that we have, we were fortunate enough to get wireless access points. We have internet under all the tent. The best option that we found, and I thought this was really clever, our teachers figured out, is they actually have everybody who's at home is on a Zoom call on a laptop, and they partner the at-home person with an in-person person, and they're kind of like their partner for the day. And so the in-person student will take the computer and shift it around when the teacher's giving instruction and like show the student. And then when they're doing group work or they're doing any kind of activities, like that's that person's partner. And it's been amazing. The connections have been fabulous. I don't know how realistic that is for people to implement, but we've had a lot of success with it. So just an idea that you can actually partner up the students that are at home with a student that's in person, given that you have the bandwidth and things like that to make it work. But that's definitely what we found has worked the best so far.
That's a very cool idea. Anybody else have anything to add to that as an additional idea? So there were another couple questions about facilities, offices that may not be quite as open as the ones that you guys have been dealing with. So there are some folks on the line, I think, that are either in teaching roles or sort of advocate roles, and they want to be able to talk to their facilities offices about the idea of expanding outdoor learning during this time, and with particular emphasis on, the concerns about maintenance. So I'm going to aim that question at Sharon first, and then Geeta, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that too.
Yeah, I think facilities departments are centrally important, and we need to be coordinating with them directly when school districts are working on this, and they should be part of the planning team and making the choices about what infrastructure is purchased and where it's put, and that will help to embed the maintenance needs in the plan. In some cases, we're working with facility departments who are coming up with modules of gear, like you've heard about here, but like phrasing, like there might be limiting the chaos level for the facilities department to have, like, if classroom unit A has picnic tables and a tent, and classroom unit B might be outdoor, the portable bag with seating, and outdoor classroom C might be another configuration that'll allow a school to order certain numbers of different types of outdoor classroom modules that they can then supply in a more with more scale and more easily roll it out. I think the maintenance piece is always always comes up as a challenge, but it's partly about what are your priorities. If this is a piece of if outdoor learning is a piece of the way that instruction is given, then it should be in the future maybe given a budget that's related to classroom supplies, right? And so I think it can be more well woven in the future to thinking about it as a central thing rather than an extra add-on, and that will help it to as it's made a priority. I think the budget will follow.
Great, thanks, Sharon. Geeta or Justin, do you guys have anything to add to that?
Well, I'm technically in facilities and operations.
Right.
I would say that we still pointed to, like I said at the beginning, all those reference documents, the CDC and everything that said this is, transmission is lower outside. This is a healthy space to be in, and that's kind of where we started. And it is tricky because there's not a huge budget for this, and step one was just getting everybody to say, like, okay, we can use the outside. We get it. We should be able to use the outside. But does that mean we magically have money to, like, put the tents everywhere we can? No. So we're a district of 56 schools. Horizons, where Lucas is one of our schools. They are a charter, so they have the ability to raise money in a way that most of our schools don't. So that's where then we've, walked the sites to say, what are some spaces we can use for basically no cost here? Yeah, it's dressing for the weather. We are working with our partners to see, our local zero waste partner is going to collect things, materials that might be useful, like yoga mats or, clipboards and things that would help in this. But it is, I'm kind of like saying again to our schools that you don't need hundreds of thousands of dollars to make this work. And, even if you're getting outside as part of your day, that's better. And again, kind of pointing to all the resources out there, guidance for school districts on how to work that all include the outdoors as part of that solution. So that's how we've made the case.
Yeah, great. And Justin, I'm going to give you final word here on that question.
On that question, okay. Yeah, so I agree with Geeta on what everything she just said too about the idea of just having a space that maybe takes a minimum amount, just some seating, or whatever it takes. We are looking, and the neighboring city of Portland already has stipended positions, what they're calling liaison, and their role is to kind of do a little bit of the maintenance and moving things in and out during if things need to be moved for weather and stuff like that. So we're doing the same, but right now it's mostly falling on us. And in my role again as the garden coordinator, I already had a pretty positive working relationships with the facilities guys, so. We're working on developing that relationship. And again, it's part of our mode of trying to create a norm. But if you don't mind too, there was another question that came up and I didn't really touch on my slides about scheduling. Is that all right if that's something I go into? Okay. So just really quickly, is we are using the Rooms feature of Google Calendar. So with Google Calendar, if your district uses their G Suite, they have a feature called Rooms, and we can basically break out by building and then assign rooms. And then when people go to schedule an event, if it's already been scheduled by somebody else, then it doesn't show up as a schedulable space. So just imagine a big corporate office with a bunch of meeting spaces, and that's kind of what Google has modeled through their system. And again, that was one of the reasons why I had all of that data from my map in a spreadsheet so that we could import it in one big fell swoop to Google Calendar. And again, it's the Rooms feature.
Yeah, that's great, Justin. And it seems like a solution that's really allowed your teachers to go outside on a regular basis. So simple technology. Awesome. I appreciate so much your time, your insights, your experience. This has been really incredible. And I know we could spend literally days talking through these topics. So I hope that, Sharon, we can bring some more content to this
topic to this group in the near future. I know that you've got some working groups who are preparing some of their best practices to share. So stay tuned, everyone. Look out for an email from me with the links that you saw in the chat today, the slides and the recording, and we'll make sure to let you know if Green Schoolyards America or others on this panel are doing any future webinars on this topic. Thank you again to our panelists. You guys are awesome. Appreciate you very much. Stay safe and see you soon. Thank you.